in this really weird process right now. So this might be the part that gets like the most, if people are drawn attention to something that we say. This, like, if you guys want to talk about the, like, what I'm actually going through right now, this is kind of what I'm going through. So when I had my last concussion, they sent me to these doctors, right? So these are not my doctors. WWE sent me to Barrows Neurological in Phoenix. They're a concussion specialist. They cleared me. Then I was like, okay, they cleared me. I'm good to go. But no, you're not good to go. Okay, so what else can I do? Send me to anybody else. Send me to, like, should we get a third opinion? Yes, okay. Send me to UCLA. They sent me there. I didn't choose these doctors. And it's a team of doctors, and they're concussion specialists, and they run me through all these tests. At the end of all these tests, they're like, you're cleared to go. And I was like, yes, I'm cleared to go. And then it's like, no, you're not cleared to go, right? And then then I start doing, like, this experimental testing, right? And it's like, so it's stuff that's not, like, even FDA approved and all that kind of stuff. And so I did this. I worked with these people at Evoke Neuroscience, which they're doing awesome stuff. It's like impact testing that WWE does, where you what they do is they test you before, like they test you when you feel great, right? And then they hook an EEG up to your brain. They're doing reflex testing, and then after, like, a fight or after you've had a concussion, they do it again, and you're not allowed to return to even train until you match up with your initial results, right? So, but that doesn't really have anything to do with, like, what I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to get more ammunition in behind me to where I can get cleared. So I go and I do this, and they give me this report that says I have a lesion in the temporal parietal region of my brain. And I'm just like, holy, am I allowed to cuss on this show?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yep.
Okay. I was like, holy shit. And it's like a lesion. And I'm just like, man, like, that's it. I'm done. You know, like, I'm finished. And I had actually, before I had taken my first test, the day I was in New York City to take the test, I had talked to Vince, and I told him, I said, like, I don't understand. Like, I was cleared by these concussion specialists. How can this not? And, you know, and he was going through some of the stuff with me in the process and everything. And then I said, okay, I'm doing this test literally today. I'm doing it, and I should get my results next week. And he said, okay, let me know when you get the results. And I got the results, and it said I had a lesion in the temporal parietal region of my brain. And I was just like, oh, man. So I called Vince, and I told him, and I got off the phone, and I was crying. And then, like, the next week, he called me, and he called me on a Saturday, and he said, Raw's in Seattle on Monday. This is before WrestleMania. It's up to you. You don't have to do it, but we'd like you to give your retirement speech in Seattle. And I was like, I didn't want to do it at first, and then I talked to Bree about it, and I was just like, man, my friends, my family could be there. You know, it's probably best. And so I give my retirement speech. It gets a lot of, like, outside media. I do an interview with ESPN on the Tuesday maybe or the Wednesday about it and about the lesion in my brain. And then all of a sudden, one of the doctors that had cleared me calls me and said, Bryan, what happened? Like, you ran through all this testing and everything was fine. What happened? And I told him what had happened, and I said, you know, they found a lesion in the temporal parietal region of my brain. And he goes, wait, hold up, a lesion? And I said, yeah. And I don't know what a lesion means to you guys. A lesion to me means that you have a cut, right? Like, I have a cut on my brain.
Like an open wound or something.
I have a cut on my brain. And he goes, no, lesion in medical terminology is a very vague thing. It just says something is there, right? Like, we don't know what it is, so we call it a lesion in the temporal parietal region of your brain. And then he goes on to look at the results of the test, and essentially what it is that my reflexes in the temporal parietal region of my brain are slower than they would expect, right? So in the report, they put lesion, you know, a lesion in the temporal parietal region of your brain. And it's just like, and then So I went and retook the test, and it's the same thing. And so it said your reflexes are a little bit slower. But one of the things that, it's just hard because they're not slower than, say, your average person, but they're slower than like your MMA athlete or people that they test for a lot of this kind of stuff, right? So I have average reflex time. And I'm just like, oh no. That's like, I don't think they understand. I'm just an average person. I'm not a real athlete. And it's like, and so, there's this thing, and it's just like, I was just like, oh no, like there's been this huge misunderstanding, right? And then, and the Evoke Neuroscience people, they were great. The lady, the doctor that I worked with, she had told me right up front, she goes, this is not what our testing is used for. She said, this is a return to play protocol, right? This would work best if we had a baseline for you, and then we could test you again to see where you're at and return to your baseline, but they're going off of, okay, what they would expect from me, and it's slower than what they expect from me, right? And they're just, so all of that to say, and then after that, but I was still okay with it. I said, in my head, I was like, if there is anything wrong with me, right? Bree and I want to have a baby. At that point, she wasn't pregnant or anything yet. We want to have a baby. I just want to live a healthy life, right? And I wanted to start moving away from wrestling because I love wrestling so much. It's really hard to be that close to it. Well, then, so Hunter called me and asked me to do the commentating thing for the Cruiserweight Classic. I said, yeah, I would love to do that. I'd love to help people get over all that kind of stuff. I'd love to be able to do that. That seems really cool. But then they called me and they didn't ask. They told me to be SmackDown GM, right? And I was like, oh, okay. And I thought I'd be okay with it. But then all of a sudden being around it every single week and not being able to do it. Like, I was never a guy who enjoyed doing promos, right? I would do it because I would do it and I got decent at it. I would never say I was great at it, but I got decent at it because that was part of the job. That was a requirement. So I tried to do my best to do as good as I possibly could with it, And but that's not fun for me. It's not fun for me to go out there and do promos. And so all of a sudden I'm around it and I'm around it. I'm not being able to do the part of it that I love the most. And then they had me out there at ringside during like an AJ Styles Dean Ambrose match. And it literally tore my heart apart, right? Like, it's just this weird thing where it's just like, what am I doing? Like, what? No, that's what I want to be doing. I don't want to be sitting here doing this. I want to be doing that. And then all of a sudden, then the part of me, I am not a very ambitious person in regards to 99% of life, but I was always pretty ambitious with my passion for wrestling.
Right.
And then I was just like, you know what? No, I'm not okay with this, And then I started looking into other stuff. And then so actually when I contacted Christian, it was because I've been doing some of the stuff with the concussion stuff about improving my brain function and all that kind of stuff. I've started working with the Joe Namath Institute with Dr. Barry Miskin in Florida, and they're doing like these new scans that are so they're doing this FDA testing, which I'm not approved for the FDA testing part, but I can still do the protocol stuff. And so they did this thing called a nuclear SPECT scan on my brain. And what that said was essentially when it came back, it's like my brain is essentially what you take any college football player in the country, because I have had multiple concussions. I've had 10 documented concussions, 4 post-concussion seizures. And but with that said, my brain is no worse than your average college football player's brain, right? You're just your average run-of-the-mill, not a guy who you think like, hey, that's a guy that guy's a high risk for brain damage, right? But still, anybody who's played any contact sports has a little something there, you know?
Yeah,
and then
for sure.
then we started doing this hyperbaric oxygen therapy treatment, and I've done 40 treatments. And then they go back and they do this nuclear SPECT scan, which actually shows how your brain is working and stuff. And there's this vast improvement. And Bree sees this vast improvement. And then Dr. Miskin thinks within 120 total treatments, so 80 treatments more, that my brain could get back to being where you would, if you looked at it from any other spectrum, you would think that I'd never done any contact sports my entire life. And now, with all of this positive stuff, I'm thinking there's no reason why I can't return to doing what I love. And it may never be full-time, and it may never be this idea that I'm going to go in and I'm going to be the guy who main events every live event and all that kind of stuff. I'm not even sure if I want that. Now that I have a child, I don't want to be away from her that much, you know?
Yeah.
But to say that I can't do what, like to wrestle, say, 50 to 100 matches a year,
right.
or to say that I can't do what Jerry Lawler and Terry Funk are still doing in their 60s. You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of where I'm at. So it's been kind of a real work in progress, and it's really tested my patience. And and I think the hard part when I look back on it is I feel like, the prime years of my career I lost, but I'm really working on like, okay, well, this is something that I love and I'm going to do it. But I also want to give the caveat of this. If at any point along with all of this, it's somebody said, like, there's a real indication that I should not be wrestling, I don't want to wrestle. Like, my health is 100% more important than coming back to wrestling. Being a good father is more important than going out there and expanding on my beliefs that doing more hammer locks in wrestling is good for the business.
Well, that was my take on it too, right? Like when my stuff happened, it was right at the time. I kind of had two back to back, and one was pretty close to when I was having my daughter, and then one was not long after I had my daughter. And then, it just puts things in a different perspective, right? My thing is, do I want to push this, or do I want to be able to have a conversation with my daughter when she's 15 years old, you know? And that was kind of my thought process on that situation at that time, you know? But I do, we and I have had some conversations about, feeling certain ways and kind of what we were dealing with and things like that. And you just called me up out of the blue and told me about this this stuff you were doing. I'm very excited about it. So yeah, definitely, it sounds like it's definitely beneficial for the things that you've been telling me.
Yeah. Well, and and one of the things too that I hope that my daughter picks up from me is like people have said this to me before. Actually, somebody in WWE management said this to me like last week. They said, with your daughter, why do you even want to do this? And I think also part of it is my daughter is one of the reasons why I do want to do it, is this idea of teaching her that, like, hey, whatever your dream is, whatever your version of wrestling is, like, you can do it, and you can't let, like, just because somebody says you can't do this because we think this, that's not a good reason to stop. Like, it'd be different if all the doctors had said, this is bad for your health. I mean, you should not do this,
Yeah.
But if all of them, if for the most part, all of them are saying, yeah, you can do this, but people are saying that you can't, like, that's not a good reason to stop doing something that you love. You know what I mean? And so, so kind of pushing that forward with my daughter and just my beliefs that, like, hey, we get this. We are very fortunate. We get this one opportunity to be alive, and, like, we're at a very, people always talk bad about, like, oh man, like, life sucks, or life this is the greatest time to be alive in human history, right? And despite, all the stuff that's going on, like so I don't know when this airs, but Charlottesville happened last week, right? Last Saturday.
Yep.
Yeah. And despite all that, there has never been a time in human history where there is less violence than there is right now. For the very first time in human history, more people are dying because of overeating than because of starvation, right? More people are dying because they kill themselves rather than because other people are killing them, right? Like, this is an incredible just time to be alive and human, and there's obviously a lot of stuff as humans that we need to work on and all that kind of stuff. But you get this one life and this incredible opportunity, the best time in human history to be alive, and you don't want to look back when you're getting to the end of the tunnel and being like, man, the things that the thing that really like drove my passion, I stopped doing it because somebody told me I shouldn't, like, I just don't think that's not fair to me, and that's not fair to kind of to tell that to other people too. So that's kind of a driving motivation of mine too, is doing it rather than saying like, oh, you're doing this despite having a daughter. I'm doing it more for my daughter than anything else. So, but that also,
well,
I'm not opposed to the idea that people think I'm delusional. So that's a very real possibility.
I have to say,
so.
I'm
just have Kendrick.
I'm relieved though. I'm relieved to hear though that if you do get word that it's not a good idea, that you're open to that, because I get where you're coming from, because one thing that I've found in not having wrestling anymore, I needed to find something else to try and fill that gap, and I don't have any kind of choice or any doctors telling me I can do it again. So I was forced to really sit down and go, okay, what else can fill this void? And thankfully, I've found that. But I need that creative outlet. I need that something in order to be a better dad, in order to be a better partner, in order to be a better man. I still need to be that version of me, whether it's and it's not wrestling. So now I've stumbled into acting, and it has, for me, helped fill that void. So I get where you're coming from. I really do. And I'm very thankful to hear that you're going to be. I just want you to be safe, be careful, and I know you will, obviously. But yeah, it's interesting stuff, man.
Yeah, and it's so weird too, because with the concussion stuff, a lot of it is so subjective right now, because they don't have much hard science on it. You know what I mean? Like, there's some really interesting stuff out there. Like ESPN just did this thing where they tested. I don't know what it is. I'm gonna make this up, but I think it's somewhat accurate. They tested 111 dead football players' brains, and 110 of them, that, like the headline said, 110 of them had CTE, right? But that's not the case. The 110 of them had the tau protein that they associate with CTE, right? And so it's
okay.
And what of those people actually had symptoms of having CTE? Like, what if that is happening? There's not a lot of, and I'm not saying that, by no means am I saying that none of those guys had CTE. I'm not like a CTE denial person or whatever, but I'm just saying that there's not a lot of research. They don't have a lot of conclusive stuff on the concussion stuff, and so a lot of it is subjective. It's like when they talk about some of the CTE deaths and people who had real symptoms, there were also a lot of those guys who had done a lot of other drugs and that sort of thing, and they don't take into account those effects on people's brains. And when I think one of the things that I hope to do about being open about all my stuff, and I had talked to WWE about this, but they're in a different position because of, like, they're a company who people are suing for concussion stuff, right? But one of the things I want to open the discussion up of saying, like, hey, like, because the media covers it in a certain way. Like, here I am. I'm a vegetarian. I've never drank in my life. I've never smoked in my life. I've never done any drugs in my life. So any damage that's done to my brain is purely because of concussions. And whoever wants to study my brain, whoever wants to to come on and be like, hey, we'd like to do this test on your brain. As long as it doesn't involve too many needles, because I'm scared to death of needles, I'm open for it. I'm open for the conversation to be talked about. And I feel like I'm a very good, when you look at science and you need like, okay, so when they're doing a test study of, okay, is running good for your heart, right? And they have a group of people who run and a group of people who don't run, and then they test them. Well, what are the people who aren't running? What are they also doing? Are they smoking? Are they doing this? Are they doing that? Or whatever, It's
right.
I think from a scientific perspective, it's nice to have somebody like me who's like, okay, I've never done anything else. You know what I mean? So any damage that's going on up there is purely because of the stuff that I've done to my body, So yeah, I'm just trying to, one of the things in talking about it openly in podcasts like this is not, I'm no way, shape, or form I'm trying to put pressure on WWE to have me return to wrestle, because like they have been so supportive of everything that I've done, you know what I mean? And people don't understand that. Like they have been 100% behind everything that I've been doing, kind of behind the scenes and that sort of thing. And so, but my hopes in talking about it more so is to open up the discussion. So.
Well, I mean, I'm really glad that you had this outlet. I had no idea we'd go down this road, so it was very cool to kind of shine some light on it. And I hope that some more eyeballs, or I guess ear holes, this is going to get spread around, and people are going to talk about this. And so, I know you're okay with that now, so that's cool. I think this may, start the discussion of some of those things that you're talking about. And it's in its infancy in terms of what we understand about it, like you said. And so a lot of the ideas are subjective. It's an interesting subject. We could probably talk about it for like 3 more hours.
So, and I don't want to I don't know how long your podcast is. I'm looking at the time on my phone saying that we've been on the phone for an hour and 36 minutes. And I'm like, man, I don't know how long your podcast is. But one of the
as long
things
as we want it to be.
Yeah. So one of the things that I find very interesting too is Dr. Javier Cardenas, who was the guy who talked to me in Barrows Neurological in Phoenix. One of the things that he had talked to me about is going and talking to kids about concussions. And I think one of the things that is important, one of the reasons also why I want to talk about this, is because I think kids, like high school football players especially, are sometimes afraid to speak up if they have a concussion, not because they're afraid that something like what happened to me will happen to them, in the sense of like, hey, I love playing football, and if I tell them I have a concussion, they're going to tell me I can't play football, right? And that's also part of the discussion. One of the reasons why it's been very hard for WWE to clear me, and this is my own fault, is because I was not honest with them about my concussions, right? And that's a big part of it. Like, your doctors have to be able to trust you as an individual, right? To when they ask you. And now this is, everybody who's an athlete, if the doctor comes up and says to them, like right after they've had a concussion, are you okay? They're going to say, yeah, I'm okay, because that's just who we are, right? As performers, athletes, whatever, you want to get back in there. But you need to be because you don't realize what's happened. But a day or two after, if you're still feeling the effects, and you're feeling the effects, and you say that you're still okay, that's not right? That's not good, because you can still return to play. You just have to stop it soon enough, And one of the things that I failed at is I was so afraid of like them finding out, right? Like I'm so afraid of them finding out that I didn't want to ever acknowledge what had happened, right? So like just keep plugging forward, and that's not healthy, and that's not good for you, and that's when you need to be honest with your doctors. I think that's the kind of discussion that we need to have with the high school football players and the college football players and maybe even the NFL players, is that, and it's becoming more spread out through all those, but any impact sport really, is that, hey, if you're open about it, that you have a better chance of healing, right? Yeah. If you get a concussion and then you try to deny it for the next 2 weeks, and you keep doing an impact sport, you're making it worse for yourself, and you're going to make it a lot harder for you to ever return to play, you know? And just being open with doctors about it. So I talked to Dr. Cardenas about that sort of thing, and we haven't done any talks. We haven't done any of the talks with kids yet. I'm not sure if I'd have to get that approved by WWE or not. But yeah, that's one of the things that I'd really like to do, and I think it's important to spread that message too. It's not just about like, hey, what do they know? What do they not know? It's also about us as athletes accurately talking to our doctors in a way that they can help us. So,
you know, it's fascinating because in our industry, part of our job is essentially to make it look like we're hurt all the time. And so it can be hard unless you really have a fine eye. It can be really hard to distinguish between, did he just get his bell rung? Or whereas with football, with any other sport, you know. And now with protocols changing and everything, I think teams and leagues are having to take extra measures. But with our industry, you can hide it. You can.
Well, it's
say,
really funny because so I get this
that's
all
an
the
important
time
thing to put out there is not to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, not to do that. It's really funny because I get people like sending me this thing all the time of like, like, oh look, here's Daniel Bryan having a seizure in the middle of a match because I've had 4 post-concussion seizures. I was wrestling Sheamus in a singles match, and I headbutted Sheamus. It was not Sheamus's fault in any way, shape, or form, but I cut my head in doing it, right? In no way, shape, or form did I have a concussion. Then I fall to the floor. Wade Barrett gives me the bull hammer, boom, and I'm bleeding, and I'm convulsing on the floor, and people use, like, look, he shouldn't wrestle. He had a seizure in the ring. And it's like, no. I mean, that's not, that was part of what we do. That was not it. Where I failed was a week or two later when I had the concussion and then tried to tell him I was okay for over a week after I had it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so yeah, and I think that's hard. That makes it harder for us as performers, but it also makes it hard for the WWE doctors to identify what's real and what's not. And that's where, as the boys too, we need to, one, because we are so, like, you get afraid of like, oh no, if I tell them about this, then I'm not going to be able to work and I'm not going to be able to make money and all this kind of stuff. But that's also
you lose
where
your spot and all of those things.
It's weird because there's that idea you don't ever want to be a stooge, but you also want to protect like your friends. You know what I mean? And just say like, but you need to talk to them about like, hey man, you're not okay. You need to, like, we need to talk to somebody about this. And there's also, one of the wonderful things to me about wrestling is that you can also protect people who have head injuries. My last match, right? My last match, I didn't take a single bump, right? And the match to me was really fun and good. It was me and John Cena against Cesaro and Tyson Kidd, and I couldn't have been working with a better 3 people, right, than to do that sort of thing. But like, I didn't take a single bump. All 3 of those guys protected me in a way that you can do that in wrestling. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's neither here nor there, I guess.
Well, it does make a difference, though, because like you said, Jerry and Terry Funk can go out there and throw fireballs, and they're perfectly, they're not taking bumps.
Yeah, absolutely. So.
No, I think.
Well,
I think the protocol, like, I mean, that we were talking about. I think that it is. I think it's gotten to the point too where, like you said, years ago, people were afraid of losing their spot or not getting paid or whatever it is. And I think that with the newer generation that's come in, I think that they do understand that they have to speak up when something's not right. Personally, I never had any issue with when I wasn't feeling right telling somebody. It was after I retired when you and I have had a few conversations about things and kind of knew what each other were going through, and I wasn't always comfortable after talking about some of the stuff, but you have made me feel more comfortable with the stuff that you do about talking about my situation too. So thanks for that.
I'm so one of the things that Dr. Barry Miskin is the guy that I'm working with at the Joe Namath Institute, and I texted him and I said, hey, I've got a couple of friends who have some concussion stuff. Is it okay if I send them your stuff? And he said to me, this is my life's work. Like, his helping people who have brain injuries and stuff is what wrestling is to me, right? That's what he lives for. That's what his passion is. And I think, like, it's really cool to see people like him and, like, neurologists all over the country. There's some great people out there doing some amazing work. And I think, like, that also needs to be drawn attention to too, you know? So.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've kept you for 2 hours now, dude. Yeah. And, but do
you know what? This is what happens. Bria's in New York with the baby, right? Like, I am a new dad who doesn't have the baby around. I don't know what to do with myself, right?
Yeah.
Like, this baby has taken up literally every second of my day for the last 3 months. Like, and now Bria and the baby are, so not only is the baby gone, but Bria's gone. Like thank you guys for occupying my time.
Just think of how many books you could have read in this time.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I would have. Yeah,
we took away book time.
I would have been all the way through something else.
Right. I would have been on chapter 4.
Yeah.
Well, man, it was really good to catch up with you, but also to hear where you're at, where you want to go, and one of the most important things I think you said is living in. I've always said there's this one song that I use as a mantra, and it's live in the present tense, it's so important, and not many of us do it. And it can be hard to stick to that, and sometimes you need reminders. So I think this podcast, as much as, hey, it's a wrestling podcast, I truly feel like this could be the type of conversation that will remind people to do that. So it's very illuminating. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me on. It was a lot of fun.